First, let me introduce myself. My name is Guy Raz. I am one of the solution architects at Satori. That name may sound familiar to you. There's an NPR reporter by that same name. If you were hoping to listen to him today, unfortunately not me. Although I'm still hoping to win that Wikipedia page from him at some point in the future. So let me tell you a little bit about what Satori does, where we came from, and what we do. So our founders, our team of engineers came from a big data consuming companies experiencing huge challenges in how they get this data. And just like, Mark, as your example was, a lot of companies with a lot of front end data locations and back end data storage, he found that there was a problem in getting data to users. So they had all of these modern tools trying to scale at cloud speed with data usage projects and security compliance or constraints, governance, and lineage issues. And the solutions that he was implementing weren't growing as fast as the data that they were trying to onboard. So what they did is they kept drowning in this red tape, pointers of teams asking for masking, asking for RLS, row-level security. And this really triggered our co-founders into thinking, I'm repeating these tasks over and over. How do I apply the same requirements, whether they be security requirements, compliance requirements, lineage requirements across all these different data locations. When I say that, I mean multiple data stores, whether they be Synapse or Fabric or Redshift and Snowflake or Mongo and Cockroach, right? All of these different data mesh approaches typically have very similar front-end security compliance requirements. So what they did is they created a product, then that's what we do, and that is a unified approach for how to govern, secure, and grant access to data. The end goal of the product is nothing more than expediting the amount of time it takes users to gain access to data while enforcing all of these security, governance, and innovation requirements for data-driven products, whether they be analytics, engineering, data science, or some other use case in between. That's really what Satori is. It's a data security platform. It creates a first of its kind data portal. If you're familiar with single sign-on products, even the Microsoft and AWS stacks of tiles where you see what applications you have access to, it's this very similar approach for access to data. You may have a data set that consists of tables in a Synapse location, plus a schema in a Redshift environment, plus a catalog in Databricks, and that those all fall under one big data lake. And so when you're creating these subsets of data meshes, each user needs their own unique experience for what kind of data they can generate, what kind of data they can access to, and in a lot of times what kind of security and compliance rules apply to that. Those can't be static because they change, data changes, rules change. They have to be dynamic and they have to be able to scale to cloud scale. And what I mean by that is the manual creation of these products has effectively created an ungoverned access layer where we see projects ending and access still granted. We see forgotten password changes or users moving roles. We see these integrations with single sign-on where we overprivilege and over-provision users in that space. And so what that means is that the more and more use cases that come along, the less this can kind of play a role in giving freedom in choice of clients, freedom in choice in data locations, freedom in choice of where users can operate and implement. And so, I want to show what this looks like in real time. I'm an architect, not a sales guy. I want to show what the product actually does and show you the value there. But quickly before we do that, I did want to kind of give you a use case, a story of one of our customers, of how this works. So,
hey, Guy.
Yeah.
Since this is right in Mark's wheelhouse at a major bank, I'm just going to, so Mark, I see you put a couple of questions for Guy. Why don't you ask them so I can make sure it's conveyed correctly? And I always want to keep this interactive.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, so you see my questions in there. What I've seen, frankly, Guy, is that there typically is native integration with the cloud providers, but most definitely not for like a Oracle on-prem or a Cloudera on-prem. And thus non-native is that in fact, unfortunately for those on-prem solutions, the each request is synchronous, meaning that the solution itself has to be involved synchronously as the request is attempted to be executed. So can you do you understand my question first off?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. I understand. I can touch on that too. It's short answer is our approach doesn't require user interaction.
No. Understand.
Yeah.
But the user interaction, meaning somebody fires a query, they don't know what happens to it, but at the point that query is attempting to retrieve the information in a native integration, the policy has already been passed, days, hours, months down to say Snowflake or Synapse. And so, the tool like yours is not actually involved in the decision because the instructions have already been provided. In an on-prem, a solution like yours is involved if it's not native, because, quite frankly, who's going to be making investments to ensure that they have native connectivity to Cloudera when Cloudera, at least in my view, is dying?
Yes. So that is very accurate. Although the architecture that Satori takes is not super unique in the industry, I would say, although it does give us a leverage on-prem deployments as well. For call it your more bleeding edge data stores like Synapse and Redshift and Snowflake and Databricks, it's native integration, right? We can leverage those feature sets. For your more legacy approaches, right? SQL on-prem, Oracle, I don't want to call out Cloudera because I still think they're a pretty cool solution, but some of we'll call it the more legacy, less supported deployments, we do offer a man in the middle approach, which is kind of unique. And so the change there becomes just a host name as opposed to credentials or query language or jar files or Java processes. It's simply a host name.
So it's
redirect.
A proxy. I mean, you use the term man in the middle, but nevertheless, whether it's man in the middle is the term or proxy, is it true that you still need to be with those on-prems? You need to be synchronously involved in the job, or
that is correct.
Okay, all right. So then, in that way, what I'm just kind of also trying to tell everybody is that your architecture then is very consistent with the other solutions I've seen.
Yeah. I don't think we're super unique in the architecture design. There's only two or three different ways to solve this problem. You can override the database fields. You can implement these client side, whether they be post data retrieval, masking and hashing or row level security. But as the data lake grows, that becomes a bigger problem. So for client tools like, you mentioned Tableau, you mentioned Power BI. I'm sure we'll hear some more stuff later from Kishore about the AWS approach to this. We have to be agnostic in a way. And so for things that allow us to do it with orchestration is kind of the term the industry uses for native. We do it with orchestration, and for tools and legacy approaches, proxy or man in the middle seems to be the best approach.
Okay. I'll have some more questions in a minute, but go ahead, keep going.
Let's keep going. That's great. And I appreciate that. Want to encourage more interaction from all of you. Again, we'll keep things moving along, cognizant of time, always have time for meaningful questions. This also illustrates that it's hard to cover everything, and all of our subject matter experts are available for more detailed deep dives on fitting together their solution with your particular infrastructure. Guy, let me encourage you to continue.
Yeah, 1000%. And thank you, Mark, for all of your comments and feedback there. So I'll just brief over this kind of case study. Innovaccer, big healthcare data cloud. They're the back end for a lot of the healthcare organizations you use, even some of the insurance providers. They basically host, manage, and orchestrate data platforms for some of the major healthcare organizations in the country. And so they have a very disparate data platform architecture. They use Azure SQL, Amazon Redshift, they use Postgres. And then when they were trying to onboard some new data mesh architectures, in this case, specifically Snowflake, we were there to help support that migration by simply orchestrating the same policies they had on these other locations into this new data warehouse, which meant that user time to adoption was nearly zero. They didn't have to change any host names. They didn't have to change any policies. They simply dragged that new Snowflake account into their predefined catalogs with a click to consume UI, which I'll show you here in a second. And that freed up a lot of time from security and compliance and concerns and sped up what this looks like to data. So I actually want to show you what this looks like in real time, as opposed to just talking through slides. I think Paula did a good job of showing us more than just telling us as well. So the way this kind of works for end users is we create this personal data portal. This is a user interactive UI that each end user gets customized based on the provisions that are sent down to them. This can be based on role groups. This can be based on attributes. If you're at all familiar with AD, Active Directory, you'll know that there is not just a user, there is attributes within that user, what their department is, what their role is, location, other identifying information that can be used to create and orchestrate policies. The industry calls this ABAC, attribute-based access control. When you integrate these with AD, it means that granular access permissions are integrated with row-level security for that attribute. So in my user's environment, I've got 2 different S3 storage buckets as well as a Snowflake environment. When I go access the data within Snowflake, some of it gets pulled because it's part of my allowed set down here, allowed set. And then some of the available locations, specifically the PHI data, like the Innovator use case, gets blocked and hidden from me, right? So we'll run a query in real time, trying to pull this data from Snowflake. It pulls the data, shows us that this is actually blocked by Satori. If you look closely within the error in the response, you can see that this is blocked by Satori as opposed to like a SQL error or a context error. And then granting access to this environment is pretty straightforward. You can set them up to be self-service, meaning users approve themselves. You can set this up with request patterns where there has to go to an approver. It can be integrated with Teams and Slack and all of these other ITSM solutions. And when an appropriate text gets put in, the request gets automatically approved, sent up into this authorization field, showing the user what data they have access to, how to access the data. And then if they go and repull their queries, it'll pull the information, all the redaction, all the RLS that we show. The cool part about this is it's data agnostic. So regardless of whether those data store locations are SQL or Snowflake or Redshift or Postgres, is that it's also agnostic in the consumption of the output. So audit teams and compliance teams and security teams want to know that these, whether it's bio users like data scientists or support engineers, or these AI ETL transformers that are pulling data from the environment are being secured, protected, regardless of where they are. We create audit trails that follow all of these transactions. Let me pull it back a little bit in time. All of these data transactions show up in the audit log, show us where that data is. Did it get approved? Did it get blocked? Did it get masked? Did we tag any of this information with classified sensitive markers? First name, email, gender, credit card, or all those types of IDs that may or may not be relevant to those users, and then give outputs that can be shared at the executive level. So the cool part behind the scenes here is that regardless of the approach, whether it's the native orchestration on stuff like Snowflake and PBI and Redshift, or whether it's more of that proxy man-in-the-middle approach with Cockroach and SQL Server and some of the other less capable systems. I say less capable in terms of their security roles, not data storage capabilities. We can unify that compliance approach as well as that thing. I do see a couple of questions for Mark. I'll want to touch on those. Let me just wrap up with a call to action here. I really think that this is better shown as a use case than it is as a presentation. If you're at all intrigued in how this works, we do offer a free test drive with the lab we set up for you. You can consider this a playground and kind of play with how this works.